Minority communities all around the world are dying, are going away. What Op would have you suggest is to take one organ of those minority communities and to try to preserve it very nicely in a glass jar so that future generations can take a look at it. But what we propose on government is to reinvigorate the blood into those communities, to revitalize them with agency and with economic prosperity so that they themselves can decide how they want to fulfill every single aspect of their communal living. That is including culture, but not limited to it. What is this debate about and what is it not about? We say this debate is not about how much money we invest in minority communities. Clearly, both sides want to invest more money in minority communities, and that's going to be symmetrical. We are going to analyze why it's likely that over time you'll get a higher investment on our side than on the other side. But that can't be fiated by either side or demanded as a stance by either side, because we obviously all want. Secondly, we say there's no fiat, especially no long-term fiat, on how that investment will actually come into play. That is, the incentives which shape how the investment in culture or in economic development are done is up for debate, is up for analysis on what are the political incentives involved in each one. What is this a big debate about then? Given a certain economic life, a certain point in time, how do we divide it between governmental investment in culture and governmental investment in economic development? We say it's best to invest entirely in economic development and leave the investment in culture to private investors and to the private market, to private NGOs, to private charities, etc., etc. So, firstly, I'll talk about where can actually government be more effective in the short and long terms, and secondly, what's more important truly here for the government to invest in, whether it is economic development or preservation of culture. And if you have any clarifications, guys, okay, good. So first, we say what's going to work. We say it's going to be significantly more successful over time to invest in the economic development. A few reasons for that. Firstly, external backlash or external resistance to that sort of investment. We say a lot of people don't understand why we should invest in minority communities, especially when those minority communities are often directly antithetical to the main community. Like, it's easy to look at African Americans and America and say, maybe that's not the case there, but clearly if you're looking at Arab communities in Israel, clearly if you're looking at minority Pakistani or Sikh communities in India, clearly if you're looking at minority communities which are actually antithetical to the theological, ideological, or ethnic stance of the majority, like Kosovar communities in Serbia, right, etc., Albanian communities in Serbia, etc. In those cases, the majority of the population is not going to want to invest for a long time in culture that they perceive as antithetical to the primary culture. However, investment in economic incentives is actually something that is much easier to get people on board with. Firstly, because there is a much more easily identifiable need on the other side, someone who is not having a good life and should be safe. Secondly, because that economic incentives lead more to integration. They have to do more with, like, more schooling. Sorry, just to clarify the sort of things that we want to invest in. Sorry, I will talk about that later, how it's likely to manifest. Just do that by analysis. And so we think less external resistance to that. I'll come to a few more reasons, but Trent, go. I would love to engage with you.
If you had to actively destroy or harm a community's culture to pursue economic development, like destroying their language and doing maximal degrees of assimilation, would you support that on your side of the house?
Firstly, yes, we think enhanced freedom to actually do what you want, enhanced economic integration is the only way to long-term preserve a culture. We think at the point at which Irish people actually have a functioning economy which is strong enough, maybe you could bring back Gaelic. But to try to artificially preserve Gaelic in like some spout of white British guilt, still under occupation, still under persecution, still under a lack of economic opportunity like the one Arab communities face in Israel or like the one Black American communities face in America, that's just a flat-out lie. That's just not something that's going to work in the long term. It's something you can pretend to do, but then, first reason we mentioned, external resistance is going to get you. Second reason that's going to get you there, internal resistance. We say that the government is the actors that people don't like in that context. They don't like to see them intermingle in that culture. The sort of Arab internal culture that the Israeli government would like to promote, or the sort of Albanian culture that the Serbian government would like to promote, is something that the minority population is going to be extremely suspicious of, and they're going to be against taking that funding in very many cases, especially when that funding is likely to be conditioned on only developing the certain types of culture that government likes. Thirdly, we say it's really hard to just be effective there. Firstly, because culture is organic and developing, and the attempt to currently preserve what is currently going on in a certain like musaical way, like the sort of way they do it when with slum tourism in Brazil, for example, doesn't really enable the organic development of that culture because it doesn't empower people to participate in that culture by virtue of actually having the monetary backing and free time to do so with. Therefore, the only people participating in the culture are the only ones directly paid by the mechanism funding culture right now. They're the only people under that pyramid of let's give you the Native American tour of this or that reservation, rather than the vast Native American population being able to participate because they now are less alcoholic and now have more equal economic opportunities in general. Fourthly, we say it's immeasurable and therefore harder to justify to voters. You can't really say we manufactured this much culture, whereas economic improvement is measurable, therefore easier to justify a long time. Why do we think that's more important? Firstly, because it enables choice and agency. When you have more money, when you have more savings, when you have a personal safety net, you can actually make more choices with how you run your life. Go.
Do you think that there are certain kinds of policies that could help in the economic improvement of these minorities, but at the same time be still able to preserve their culture?
Like, yes, but to that extent, we don't see where those policies would necessarily factor into that debate, into this debate. Like, obviously, we're both for doing. So firstly, agency, more personal safety nets, more savings, more opportunities for your kids, and more community leaders which can actually empower from within in a more wiser and actually informed way. Like, you know, I don't want to take like the extreme example where we say that the Oprahs of the world are just more effective than white senators at deciding which aspects of culture to preserve. And even if you don't look at that, even if you just look at like successful professionals giving back to their cultures, pulling people out, helping communities organize, that's just a lot more effective than governmental investment in that context, but it only happens if you gave those people the economic opportunities to succeed with in the first place. If even in the extreme cases where you have divergent language, you gave them the majority language to succeed with and to get economically empowered with. Second, we say the preserving culture often jails people in. If you're only ever taught the native, your native language in the Mexican indigenous community, you're not able to participate. And we say to the extent that that limits choice, even if it preserves culture, it's a bad thing. Tom will talk more about everything, but thanks.